In early July 2017, women parliamentarians from the SADC region met in the beautiful island of Seychelles at an occasion graced by President Denny Form and some members of his cabinet.
We'll be welcoming to our shores 3 mega advocates of an HIV/AIDS-free generation to come. President Bohamba, President Motlanthe, and the former Vice President Speciusa Wandira Kazibwe from Uganda, who have done milestones in ensuring that there is awareness, sensitization, and action to ensure that we have, as near as possible, a generation free of HIV/AIDS.
The objective was to seek better ways of combating HIV/AIDS. A UN AIDS report states that Southern African region has the highest HIV/AIDS infection rate in the world. In countries such as South Africa and Zimbabwe, the infection rate ranges around 2,000 a week among girls between the age of 15 and 24-year-olds. SADC Parliamentary Forum, in conjunction with UN agencies, civil society, and development partners, organized this gathering of SADC women parliamentarians.
Our collaborating partners here today, I wish you can appreciate this point. Issues of women's sexual reproductive rights and health will remain a pipe dream if you don't assist women to get into party politics and ensure that they are empowered to deliver on their mandate. 50-50 is still relevant. It is a must. 2030 expiry date on gender inequalities is a must. Entrusting to National Women's Caucus. Outcomes of this meeting will be irrelevant if they fail to appreciate the role of women in politics, availing funds through a budget system that appreciates women's needs. Program Director, it would be a big mistake if I don't request the members of the RWPC here today to stand up and greet you, and that is why when we started, I said, can we please get up so that you could see them. Program Director, objective of this important event are as follows: to set out a crisp manner, a deliverable agenda for SADC parliaments as part of the implementation of Resolution 60/2. Secondly, to facilitate the overarching objective to tackle the high rates of new infections among young women and adolescent girls in the SADC region. To enable the SADC region and each national parliament to achieve its share to the global target to bring new infections among young women and adolescent girls 15 to 24 years down below 100,000 by 2020. SADC region, including SADC parliaments as the leader and sponsor of the resolution, utilize outcomes of this engagement to mobilize the resources to deliver the chosen thematic areas.
The initiative recognizes the role that national parliaments and parliamentarians can play in the fight against HIV/AIDS. MPs are not only expected to initiate laws that help uproot the causes of high incidence of HIV among women and girls, but monitor the implementation of these laws.
As members of parliament, we have gathered here for those women and girls. As elected representatives of the people, we have the power and the mandate to make a difference in the lives of our people, particularly women and girls. We can achieve this through our various roles and mandates that include representation, advocacy, lawmaking, budgeting, oversight, and shaping opinions. As opinion leaders, we can certainly do it, and we can change the lives of our girls. Honorable members, for us to make a positive difference in the lives of our people, we need to consult widely. As leaders, we don't know it all. We need to consult widely. We need to work with like-minded individuals and be informed informed about the current and emerging challenges facing our people. We need to understand what is that which bothers our people for us to be able to help them. It is only after we have clearly understood the causes and the extent of the challenges that affect our communities that we can be able to come up with targeted interventions. That is why I'm excited about this Women's Parliament. Honorable members, our society is changing. Our young people, including adolescent girls, now have very high levels of access to information communication technology.
The gathering critically reviewed progress made in implementing United Nations Resolution 60, Section 2 on women's status, focusing on women, the girl child, and HIV/AIDS. The resolution calls on governments, international partners, and the civil society to pay attention to the high levels of new HIV infections among young women. Resolution 60, Section 2, sponsored by SADC, has its origins in the Maputo Protocol that comprehensively framed out the protection of the rights of the African women who, however, continue to be treated as second-class citizens, abused, and discriminated against, conditions that perpetuates the subservient role of women, making them more vulnerable to infections. Delegates said that weak laws and lack of willingness to implement the laws where they exist are to blame for the increase in new infections among the women and the young girls. Hence, these women parliamentarians have decided to take the lead in the fight against HIV.
South Africa has adopted a multi-sectoral approach to the challenge of HIV. This multi-sectoral approach is articulated in an HIV/AIDS comprehensive prevention, care and treatment program. The key components of the program include voluntary counseling and testing, prevention of mother-to-child transmission, antiretroviral therapy, condom distribution, and awareness education. In terms of the constitutional mandate of our parliament to approve the national budget, our parliament has engaged with the idea of gender-responsive budgeting, advocating for budgets that focus on mainstreaming of gender issues in 2015. The South African Parliament hosted the Women's Roundtable discussion on the theme, Accelerating Women's Empowerment and Development through Agenda in the National Development Plan and Financing for Gender Equality.
It was during the 60th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women that SADC highlighted the need to strengthen the focus of HIV and AIDS interventions on women and the girl child, culminating in Resolution 60, Section 2. The realization by SADC of the importance of Parliament and parliamentarians in the fight against HIV resonates with the Global Agenda, Sustainable Development Goals, and the Africa-Focused Agenda 2063 that all recognize the critical nature of legislatures and the legislature as game changers in the war to end HIV/AIDS.
The United Nations Development Programme has been pleased to join with the Southern African Development Community Parliamentary Forum, with its members, particularly the Parliament of the Republic of the Seychelles, and with fellow UN agencies to support this SADC Parliamentary Forum for the realisation of Resolution 62 of last year's Commission on the Status of Women on eradicating HIV/AIDS for the women and girl child of the world. The fundamental message that I would like to impart in these remarks is that resolution can only be achieved if it's understood and applied in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals and the very clear and necessary linkage that they make between ending HIV/AIDS, achieving equality for women and girls, and attaining good governance, including good parliamentary governance.
Former heads of state and government, known as the champions of an HIV-free generation have been roped in to help drum up support for the crusade against the epidemic.
That there are no easy solutions. In the face of numerous difficulties, however, we must not shy away from developing new routes to the future that we dare to dream of. That is a future that is inhabited by a generation free of our present challenges. I join you today as a member of the Champions for an HIV-free generation. This group is comprised of 13 former heads of states and governments who are committed to making an impact during our time while being deeply mindful of how our political connections and influence can contribute towards our end goal. We are acutely aware that complacency on the part of leadership can easily become a significant obstacle in effectively responding to public health challenges. Governed by this knowledge, we are committed to mobilized, engaged, and accountable leadership.
I'm endeavoring to ensure that all the women of Africa do what we need to do in Africa first. And that is very pertinent to this forum. We can talk about everything, but without Africa being peaceful and secure and free of conflict, whatever policies we make will go down the drain. So I'll be calling upon the SADC women parliamentarians to join us in the panel as FemWise Africa to ensure that each country has a peace movement. Each country involves women in conflict and mediation at every level.
I am convinced that the results of the deliberation that will take place here over the next 2 days or so will add the necessary traction in efforts to achieve the objectives of the resolution 60/2 and its focus on addressing the impact of HIV and AIDS on women and girls' children. Director of Ceremonies, research has repeatedly shown that African women and girls, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, bear the brunt of disproportionately higher burden of global HIV and AIDS pandemic. In sub-Saharan Africa, starting from young age, there is a higher incidence of HIV.
This initiative comes as some countries in the region are failing to cope with new infections, especially among the youth. Young activists attending this first conference are concerned that the weak and discriminatory laws are negatively impacting on girls of school-going age who are being deprived of an empowerment tool, education, that can offer them choices in life.
We shouldn't always talk about girls. I know it's very important to be decent and moral, and it can affect a lot of things, but then let's not always just tell the girl to stop putting on miniskirts or anything. Let's tell the man to have dignity and respect and to understand that this girl affects a lot of people. This girl is someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's future mother even, and this girl could be the president of Zambia.
I say this today, that education removes the dark cloth of ignorance from a girl child and gives her the opportunity and the light and hope that comes with the emancipation that comes from education. That is why we should fight for our girl child to have access to education. This way, this is the only way that leads to equality that is above equity.
Recent studies reveal that Southern Africa, with with less than 5% of the world's population, is home to half of the global population living with HIV, with 48% of the world's new infections among adults in 9 countries of the region. Nevertheless, delegates agree that sound policies do exist, but these are not matched with the actual practice on the ground.
I think the parliamentarians have a huge role to play in supporting the African Union in its campaign against early child marriage. Ensuring that girls are kept in school should also be a preventive methodology, because when they're in school they get the information. When they're in school they're not idle. When they're in school they're not out there and at risk. When they're in school and they have the support from the family, from the social system, the sugar daddy syndrome is kind of reduced. So keeping girls in school must also be a preventive strategy to prevent HIV.
In our country, we have actually a lot of restriction, but the implementation is the one that has been lacking. And you find parliamentarians and councillors and all these people in power, you find they will talk about casually, but they would not act. But every minute, every second, a girl child is in more and more danger. And every girl child, one child is dying, girl child is dying at every second from abortion which are not safe, being implanted, silenced, defiled, raped, all sorts of things. But yet statistics are there, but the implementers are not there. So we need the parliamentarians to take lead. And they should prosecute those people conclusively and not even hide their identification. Because if they hide their identification while they are prosecuting, it really erodes the importance of it.
The MPs believe that the fight should not only be restricted to provision of antiretroviral therapy or highly active antiretroviral therapy and condoms.
We need to lobby for integrated budgets in poverty alleviation and in other areas so that we integrate sexual reproductive health. We also need to make sexual reproductive health for adolescents a political priority issue. Let's make this a voting issue. Go to the communities and lobby that if you vote for me, I will ensure that your children will not drop out of school. I think many parents will want to hear that. And we also heard a lot about the issue of education. This is discussed all the time. Education, men involvement. There was an important message from our young girl, which was, we need information, but she also mentioned, do no harm. Give us safe information. I think that's important.
During group discussions, delegates exchanged notes on ways to fight the epidemic.
I am saying the root of women oppression is inequality and the power relations connected to inequalities. And unless our legislation speaks to the power relations, we are not going to solve this problem. We must root our legislation on addressing the inequalities that make it okay for a man to have sex and be congratulated, and for a woman having that same sex to be laughed at.
The ratio of girls to boys in school for gender parity in secondary education, it's the one. So it's the boys and the girls are equally have got access to schooling, to education in Seychelles.
Que, como África Austral, podemos aprender do exemplo de Ruanda, para atingir 50% por 50%, incluía em todos os seus debates, os seus trabalhos, os homens. Nós, na maioria dos casos, fazemos programas só entre nós. Como é que nós vamos consciencializar o homem para que nos perceba qual é a nossa luta? O homem também deve ser consciencializado. Então, nos nossos programas, temos que incluir os homens. Eu gostei por ter visto alguns homens de manhã, nesses nossos programas, deputados, os homens da sociedade civil. Não devem ser apenas aqueles que trabalham conosco como parceiros. Não. Suponhamos que vêm em Moçambique para trabalhar com as mulheres, chamem os deputados também para trabalhar com eles.
é para eles irem percebendo qual é a causa justa da nossa luta. A terceira questão que eu tinha era no sentido de, ao introduzirmos nos currículos a educação sexual reprodutiva, teremos que ter em mente que, por vezes, há aquelas questões em que os jovens aprendem na escola e vão praticar. Então, como é que nós devemos introduzir essa saúde sexual reprodutiva para que seja exatamente para eles aprenderem e poderem consciencializar-se para poder esperar a idade que é permitida para poder casar.
And after 2 days of intense discussions, this is what SADC women parliamentarians see as the way forward.
The Commission recognized that SRHR is a fundamental issue that needs to be integrated as a cross-cutting matter to other programs to grantee a holistic approach by youth development. Women who have had abortions penalize women for exercising their basic rights, and we must put an end to such practices as they are not only abhorrent, but they undermine the very essence of women emancipation. Criminalizing abortion compels some to employ unsafe methods, thus compromising their lives or health.
To document the laws that are in our countries and start interrogating them. For example, some of our countries say for abortion to take place, yes, it looks like it's been authorized, but it's talking about signatures of 3 doctors. And if you are deep in rural parts, where are those 3 doctors coming from?
The presentation underlined the fact that law, no matter how good and comprehensive, are not the only panacea to gender-based violence. In fact, the law may, in and of itself, entrench gender inequality, fuel violence and HIV-related discrimination, and strip women of the little autonomy and independence they enjoy. The presenter noted, for instance, that the criminalization of HIV transmission has resulted in negative, unintended consequences on women, including, but not limited to, women being largely blamed for HIV transmission, and the inability of the law to protect women from violence and coercion.
In our respective countries, constitutions may not be the all and end of gender-based violence. I'm also firmly convinced that the problem lies not in the legislation per se. I humbly submit, Madam Chair, that the stand of Africa in general and SADC region in particular, with respect to addressing gender-based violence, resides primarily in the terms of political will and commitment to gender agenda.
And during our discussions, we resolved that there was a need to convene a young women summit. In my country, we call it an Inda, Invo, where their voices will be heard, unedited voices, Madam President. This summit will then feed into the development of the model law on access to safe abortion. So we are saying, let us move slowly but surely. We shouldn't rush this model law. Let us hear the unedited voice of the girl child.
I think as members of parliament, we are coming up with all these ideas without the involvement of the youth. We need to hear those unedited voices of the youth. That's critical.
The outcome of the 2-day sitting was the Mahir Declaration. in which women parliamentarians from the region committed themselves to address the root causes of HIV/AIDS among women and girls. The MPs recommended that women and girls should have access to education and that girls who fall pregnant while in school be allowed to continue with their education. They also called for an end to child marriages and protection for those already in that situation. The honors to read the declaration was given to a local schoolgirl, and this marks the beginning of a new chapter in the 20-year existence of SADC Parliamentary Forum.
The marriage declaration is a powerful document that, if implemented, can bring about a positive change in the lives of women and girls. Resolution 60, Section 2 was coined by SADC. Going forward, SADC will take the lead in creating awareness around the resolution and the marriage declaration through various avenues, including engaging with the media, NGOs, faith-based organizations, and even traditional authorities through our national parliaments.
The unity displayed by women, legislators, and civil society organizations alike has given me the confidence that the future of the women of this region is in safe hands. However, what we must do, honorable members and distinguished civil society representatives, is to carry this momentum forward by ensuring that we deliver tangible results on the commitments that we made in these 2 days.
For 16-year-old Zambian girl, Natasha Mwansa, it's time the parliamentarians walk the talk.
I don't think this is a time to just come and sit down and look at policies and reread them or come up with a draft and then let it end there. No, this has to go out there. There has to be an impact made.
We are not doing as well as we should. Progress is slow. I heard you talking about training in gender budgeting. We are doing this in government. We are doing that. But at the end of the day, you need to go and check the results. Are you influencing the budget that it makes a difference in the lives of women? If it doesn't, it means all the training you're undertaking is not making any difference. Then you need to go back to the drawing board and say, what can we do differently?
For this gathering, the message is clear. They will no longer be weakened by numbers of HIV infections, but vow to turn frightening HIV/AIDS statistics into positive action that will create an AIDS-free generation. If the passion displayed during the inaugural SADC Women Conference to review progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS is translated into action on the ground, then indeed an HIV-free generation is possible.